I'm at Flickr and I found this resource just kind of browsing around on a forum one day, talking about open source photos that you can use and you can use freely in commercial projects. And this is one of the resources that I found is the British Library. And I looked this up and you are free to use these on anything, even commercial projects. So double check. I always tell people double check because things can change. But you can use these as anything in your project. They're open source and free to use. So I thought some of these were really cool. It has that traditional look I kind of like, the hand drawn with the pen, and I wanted to do that's where I found my bird. So I wanted to find something with Africa. So I'm just going to type in Africa, and I'm not going to type it down up here because this will search all of Flickr. You want to go down to here to this little icon and search that way. Of course, you can find your photo anywhere. It doesn't have to be from the British Library. You may want a more modern style. You may be fine without a photo and you just want to stick with a cool geometric pattern. Then we were almost done and you can do kind of a different arrangement. But I'm just going to go through my whole process. So let's go search, and I can just type in Africa and see what pops up. We want to make sure we are culturally sensitive, that we don't use anything that's offending or offensive, that we use something that's really classy and classic. We could use a map. We can use a zebra, something that kind of represents Africa and the single origin cocoa beans that are harvested. So we kind of want to think about that. We could do the interesting, lots of different options. So I went ahead and found a couple ahead of time, and I'm going to see you in Photoshop, where we're going to prepare those images to be able to be placed on our design. So these are the 3 photos that I found that I thought would be kind of neat and pair well with the other version, the other bar in the series. So I'm trying to think which one would maybe work better. Let me go back to this. This one's good. I'd have to do some Photoshop to cut out. You can tell this was taken a picture out of a book. You can see kind of where the type is. So not all these photos are going to be perfect, but they're free to use. So I'm thankful for that. This looks like it'd be really cool and interesting. So I'm going to go ahead and double click. We'll use this one. If we don't like it, we have a really cool second option. So how am I going to prepare this to go on a white background? This kind of has this kind of old book texture. It was just a picture taken from an old book, so we need to be able to remove that. There's a couple ways we could do that. We could kind of see what we can grab with the magic wand tool. Let's go ahead and select our layer and click and see how good it removes everything. There's a couple ways. There's also a way where we can isolate that color. So we can go to Select, Color Range, and we're going to isolate that vanilla color. So we're going to go ahead and take the eyedropper tool and sample this. Maybe hold down Shift and sample a couple of colors around it. Kind of adjust the fuzziness, kind of the pickiness of it. Okay, I can click on OK, and let's see how well that removed everything. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete. I'm going to go ahead and add another layer underneath, a transparent layer. And I'm just going to delete, and now I'm just left with the ink. So let's go ahead and do a solid color. I'm just going to do a color to test out how well that removed. So I'm just taking this bottom transparent layer and just adding a color to kind of see how that looks. Let's go ahead and do white. So that's white. So that did a pretty good job. I don't like how it removed too much of the plant, but it did a really good job of isolating. I guess that's an antelope or whatever that is, a white. I don't know. It looks like an antelope to me. So I could take the eraser tool. I could remove the elements here and just not have the plant. That's always an option. I could have just added a mask too and just kind of erased it. Let's go back. Let's see what it looked like before. So yeah, it didn't select all that as much as I want. So we can go back and do the color picker again and see if we get some better luck. Or we can go back and manually kind of erase it. So let's go back to color range. Let's unselect. Let's try again. So let's go to Select, Color Range. Let's go ahead and select this general color. So I wonder if the image, selection, so that's going to select less, so maybe kind of reduce the fuzziness a hair. Click on OK. Let's see how that works. So So that keeps a little bit more of the background intact. Just doing a white color to see how much it removed. So I'm just going to take the eraser tool. I'm just going to erase some of these kind of erroneous kind of parts of the photo, things that I just think is too much, unnecessary. I think that's probably good. Keep that. Great. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this little solid color I was using just to see how it looks. And so we're going to export this as a Photoshop file or save as. So I just went to File, Save As. I'm just going to type in photo and save it to my desktop. So I'm back here in Photoshop. I imported it into Illustrator and realized, you know what, that ink color is a little too light. I want to have it a little bit more like a darker ink stamp color. So that's no problem. I have our little isolated graphic here. I'm just double clicking on this top layer and I'm just going to do a color overlay. So it's going to go ahead and color all the ink on that layer the same color. And I'm going to make it a dark color, not too dark, but kind of a little more gray and a little darker. Maybe right about there. So we're able to darken it. So this is the original, and this is us isolating it. So now we don't need this colored layer anymore because we want it to be transparent. Now I'm ready to go back into Illustrator. Okay, so I opened up our little transparent Photoshop file, and I'm just going to drag it over to our Illustrator document. Of course, it's humongous, which is also a good sign. It's a high resolution. If I ever want to know what the resolution is on an imported photo in Illustrator, let's go ahead and I have it just selected. If you go up here, it says it's a 578 ppi, which is excellent. I try to shoot for 300 if I can for printed projects. So sometimes if it's 200, I let it slide, but anything lower than 150, you might want to start to seek a higher resolution photo because it's going to print a little less crisp than you like. Okay, so I'm just doing some positioning and sizing. I'm just going to play around with some positioning, make that a little bit smaller perhaps. So overall I like that. I can select this, I can reduce the transparency a little if I do think the ink is too dark. Or I want to make it smaller, I can. So I'm liking how this is coming together. I think I want to maybe tweak the pattern a little bit more. And I'm thinking the sticker or this adhesive sticker that's going to go on the front and go up and back into the back and become the ingredients list and the barcode. I want this to be like a linen texture. So when you think about product design, you got to think of the textures and the type of paper that you're going to be printing on. And so I'm thinking of this linen blend. And I want to show the client this, but I can't exactly get this printed yet because we're just not that far in the approval process. So I'm going to try to emulate and kind of make it look like there's a linen texture to kind of give the client an idea of kind of what textures I wanted to use for the adhesive sticker and also for the actual wrapper. So I'm going to go ahead and find a white linen texture. And I went ahead and found one for this one that I'm just going to adapt. I believe I found it on Pexels.com. I'm just going to go ahead and just copy and paste this little guy right here. And I'm going to go ahead and release the clipping mask, kind of show you how I did all this. Go ahead and make that 100%. So this is the linen texture I found right here. And all I did was kind of make it a little bit smaller. I copy and pasted the size of the box. Just drug it over. What I'm going to do is I'm going to select both elements, right click, and I'm going to make a clipping mask just so it's in that perfect square. Go ahead and zoom in, and I'm just going to send it backwards in the layering system. I'm just holding Command and doing a bracket. Doing the left bracket, and I'm going to do the right bracket to send it up and back in the layering system. And I'm going to go ahead and reduce the transparency just a little bit. So you can see how when I reduce the transparency, it gives the effect of maybe a linen texture, but it's not at all. It's just kind of the effect when you zoom out, that it's got some sort of texture to it. It's not just a glossy finish. So now I feel like there's something missing with the design. I mean, I like it, but I feel like this top part, it just needs a little kind of blocking out. So I'm thinking about putting a nice border around the white sticker to kind of give it more of a distinct layered look. I'm going to go ahead and highlight all of my elements here. I'm just selecting all of my elements, and I'm going to just reduce the size because I want to make room for the line, the border. So I'm just going to take a simple box, draw a border, make it a stroke. I want to make it a thin, elegant stroke. I don't want it to be thick and chunky. And I do want to do my round join corners and my round cap. Kind of gives it a polished look. So now I may have to play a little bit with the stroke. I don't want the stroke to overpower anything in the design, so I want it nice and thin. And I also want to make sure I have a thick margin between everything, including this line. I can even make it even thicker. Make sure I don't have snap to point on, view, smart guides. So I'm going to do everything manually. That'll roll off to the other side when we do that. Okay, so I want to add something else to this. I think it needs a little bit of a pizzazz to it. Instead of just being a simple box, I'm going to make it the pattern of the stroke a little more complex. I'm just going to add another box. I'm going to hold down Shift as I make this box to make sure it's an even box. I can get my eyedropper tool, sample my stroke, so it's the same style. I'm just going to bump it up. Just going to zoom in here. I'm just bumping it up to this right here. Maybe make it a tad bit smaller. Go ahead and zoom in. Zoom in. There we go. Got the corners a tad bit smaller. Make sure the stroke stays the same. So I'm just going to eyedropper tool. I'm just going to copy and paste. Bring it on over to the other side. I'm just going to select these two elements. I'm just going to go down to align and make sure they're aligned across perfectly. So I'm just going to do maybe a bottom align. Click on that. So there we go. We have kind of a little bit of an extra element. And I could even maybe bring in this white part just a little bit. So great. So let me bring back my linen texture. And there's another thing we can do just to kind of give the client a good idea of kind of the layering we're trying to do with the adhesive sticker. Select this white element, add just a very tiny bit of a drop shadow. So I'm going to go down to Stylize, Drop Shadow. I'm going to do Preview. I'm just doing a very subtle drop shadow, not too much, and I want it to be very close. I don't want it to be a long casted shadow. I want it to be very tight since the adhesive sticker is not going to be floating in midair. So we want to have a nice tight cast shadow and very subtle, so maybe just 33%. So that just kind of gives the idea that that is not printed on the wrapper, that's something that goes on top of the wrapper. Let's bring our linen texture. That's not going to actually be on our final design we send to the printer, but it is on the mock-up that we'll send to our client. And I want to add kind of a texture that's going to be printed on this black. Instead of just having a solid charcoal gray, let's add a little bit of a texture. And I sourced around for textures for a little bit. I believe I found this on Pexels.com. Let me go ahead and make this normal. This is a beautiful little texture. It's like a slate rock. And I thought that looked really cool on the black. So let me go ahead and release the clipping mask so you can see what it looks like. So this is what it originally looked like. And we're going to do a little transparency mode on this to get the right look over the black. So let's kind of reduce the size on that. I'm going to right click. I'm going to, it's kind of my little trick to kind of do layering. I'm going to arrange, send it to the back, and then I'm just going to do my little command right bracket, kind of bring it forward until I see it appear. There, right about there. Of course, you can always go to your layers and have a background layer instead of just everything in one layer. So it just depends on how you like to work. Sometimes I like to just have one layer. I know I'm crazy. It makes sense to have multiple layers here so that you can lock layers and not accidentally select the background. So when I do more complicated designs, I definitely like to use layers. But for this, I'm going to keep it all on one layer. It's up to you what you want to do. And I'm going to do some transparency modes because this is way too much. We just want a very subtle texture to show through the black. So I'm going to play around with some different transparency overlays. I believe I had soft light or hard light. Hard light, and I think I kind of reduced the transparency a little bit. It's great. Right there. So just add a little bit of texture to it. Let me see kind of what I did here. Hard light 62. So let's go back. Hard light, let's make it a little bit stronger. So 62 opacity. There we go. So let's play around with the pattern. I think that's the only thing kind of missing here is the pattern. And then we're going to apply this chocolate bar to a mock-up so we can get this approved by the client. And then lastly, we can go ahead and do our backside. We're going to go ahead and do the sticker as a separate little thing we can export and send to the client or to the printer. So we'll go that's kind of what's coming up. So stay tuned.